Good morning, everybody. How is everybody? It's so exciting here. I'm sure everybody is so bubbling with ideas and new inventions and visions about AI for good. I know that I am, and I know that AI is personal. AI is very personal, shaping our lives in so many ways. And the personal, of course, is also political. But what I want to ask each one of you to do for a moment is to pause and think, what is the most personal way that AI can affect you and your loved ones in good, well-being ways, improving our world and our environment, our health? For my family, the answer lies in automation of medical devices. I have 3 daughters. The middle one is bionic. Like millions of children around the world, my daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, with juvenile diabetes, at the age of 13. We were traveling as a family, including with my father, who's a medical doctor, and we all missed the signs of early onset of diabetes, which is extreme thirst and loss of weight. The condition, it requires 24/7 monitoring. And we did it, we learned, we networked, we went on Facebook and found friends who are dealing with the same issues and challenges. But the reality was that it was very taxing and very difficult to maintain the right insulin levels, the right glucose levels throughout time. From the start, she was wearing a glucose monitor and an insulin pump, so 2 medical devices. But the amazing news that just happened is that there has been regulatory approval for a closed-loop software system, AI, that makes autonomous decisions and speaks to both of these devices and really alleviates so much of the kind of cognitive taxing, the resources that are so difficult to focus on when you are doing it as humans. There's so many other ways that AI is changing our lives in a personal way. I actually research in some of my writing the dating world, sex tech. We're not going to talk about this right now, but it's of course very interesting and personal. We know about all these examples from education, from financial health, from work, from climate. And in healthcare alone, there's been hundreds of approvals of AI in health and medical devices and medicine, in care and patient care, including this cute parrot that is right here at our summit. And it got clinical approval after clinical trials that shows that it alleviates loneliness, it helps patients dealing with different medical conditions. In radiology alone, we have a couple of hundreds of approvals now. But if that number sounds like a large number, I want to tell you that it's actually quite a small number. It's dwarfed compared to the potential, the immense potential of what is already here, what has been in development, what is in clinical trials, and the potential that further exists. I want to tell you or suggest that we are at a moment that is really hindering a lot of the deployment and the use of AI for good. We're at a moment of a techlash, and the techlash is not simply kind of a focus on some of the wrongs that have been exposed by some tech companies, but really it's kind of an indictment of technology itself in a lot of our conversations, both in our public conversations and in the public policies that we see. And it's not only that the train has left the station on technology and AI, so you hear these calls of let's have a moratorium on certain technologies, let's slow down deployment, let's ban certain capabilities that are right now here. It's not the nature of technology that we have kind of the train that has left the station, or to mix metaphors, we don't put the genie back in the bottle. And in fact, the reality is that AI, where we see some recent voices saying it's similar to the nuclear bomb, let's put the genie back in the bottle. AI is not the nuclear bomb. It's not one single thing. Many of you know this very closely, that AI is a large spectrum of capabilities, and it can be used for good, and it can be used for wrongs. But what is happening more disturbingly, is that the metaphors that we use and the conversations that we're having are tunnel visioned on the wrongs, the risks, the fails, the harms, the alarms, and the fears. And as a behavioral researcher, I look at how these kind of ways that we process information as humans, and the cognitive biases, the behavioral biases that we have, are presenting themselves in very patterned ways, very specific ways, in how we are describing and how we're discussing AI right now. And when I talk about cognitive fallacies, I'm not even simply referring to the ultimate fallacy of the Terminator, what I call the Terminator fallacy, that AI will rise and terminate all of us. That is something that in my research I trace as kind of as old as time. From Golem to Frankenstein to contemporary Hollywood, we've always had fears of machines becoming sentient and destroying our planet, rising up against us. It's not that we shouldn't think about this, but I want to ask you to think about the stakeholders, the interests, and the consequences of focusing so much in our public debates, and again, on the regulations and policy proposals that are coming out, when we look simply and very narrowly at the unknown, very future moment, and without really kind of understanding any mechanism of how that happens. And let's look at that. I want us to think about the capabilities that we have right now, and how we are failing in rationally deciding whether and how to bring AI for good to the world. So the first fallacy is that we are constantly holding a double standard for AI, automated decision-making, and human decision-making. We see so many reports, both governmental reports and reports by the media, saying AI is not ready because it had this failure here, or it is imperfect on equality measures. Whereas we're not looking at kind of the comparative advantage. The right question, of course, for example, whether an autonomous vehicle is ready to hit the road, is not whether it's 100% safe, but whether it is safer than a human driver. The double standard is not only in whether it's outperforming in its current capabilities, but also in what you hear a lot about saying, well, AI is a black box. We don't understand it, it's not transparent. Of course, we want to have more explainability and transparency, but as somebody who has been researching and teaching and serving as an expert witness in discrimination cases for 2 decades, I'm acutely aware of our human biases, our unconscious biases, our conscious biases, and it's very difficult most of the time to really understand and decipher our tiny black box that we call brains, that are algorithms as well, and understand what is beneath them. The other fallacy that is related is that we present a fail of a technology that has been deployed, and then we kind of think, okay, let's just throw it away, like facial recognition. You see this rehashing of the same story. It failed in equally detecting different demographics, different genders, faces, then it's a bad technology. But we need to be very specific about what is the source of the problem, is it correctable, and what is the trajectory, the comparative advantage of the trajectory of improvement of an AI system versus improvement of a human recognition or decision maker. The third fallacy, which I get very, very furious when I see it too often, is not taking into account the lack of resources around the world, the scarcity that exists in access, and the disparities, the huge wealth disparities that exist in access to medicine, access to education, and other important issues for our well-being. So, for example, you'll see reports when we do adopt a comparative lens, you'll see a reporter saying, or even a government agency, I've seen this in my conversations and my consultation with different agencies around the world. They say, well, if you take the two most expert radiologists and compare them to a bot radiologist, then let's say it's on a mammogram detection, breast cancer detection, then we're at 85% accuracy rate here with the two humans, and we are at 81%. So still, the humans are outperforming, so not ready for deployment. That is absolutely hubris. That is unethical to think in that way, because most people around the world do not have access to of the most expert professionals that are making decisions about our health. The fourth fallacy is that losses loom larger than gains, or the status quo bias. So this is actually a very prevalent behavioral bias that is very well documented, that we all suffer from, also not in the context of AI. We fear change. We feel the pain of something going wrong much more than we feel the benefits of something going really well. And so, again, there's this idea that as long as we are not 100% sure about risks, then we're not changing anything. But again, if you think about the history of human existence, we have so many problems and challenges, and right now we're facing huge challenges, wicked problems around the world, with climate, with poverty, with disparities, with health challenges. And so we need to think in a much more rational way about the costs and benefits, not only of maintaining or changing, looking at the risks of changing to an automated system, but also the costs and benefits, the risks of maintaining what we have right now. The fifth fallacy is that the proposals that are coming out are very flat. They're very narrow. We think as policymakers, as governments, as regulators, that there are kind of two choices. We either allow a technology to be approved, and you've heard these proposals, let's just have an FDA approval system of all AI that might be ready, or ban the technology altogether, like some proposals and some actual legislation about banning biometrics and other technologies. There are much richer ways in which we can do policy. We need to invest in different technologies. We need to scale them. We need open source technologies. And all of this can be fueled by much more nuance and much more attention for AI for good and law of AI for good. The sixth fallacy, I think it's quite controversial. I'm happy to talk to you more about this, but there is this assumption that privacy always protects, and one of the leading kind of reactions to the fact that we have newfound capabilities to collect much more data, to know more, is to minimize data collection and to not collect, to ensure privacy rights. I love privacy. I'm on the advisory board of one of the leading international privacy organizations. I think it's a basic right. But it is one right. We've always had in our normative systems, we've had in democracies, lots of different goals and missions and values that we try to balance. There's always tensions between them. And we should not put privacy on a different playing field. We should not privilege it over other goals. For example, the collective good, equality, speech, safety, accuracy. The seventh fallacy, and last fallacy here that I'll talk to you about, is that we conflate this idea of being human-centric, or let's use the language of AI for good for humanity, AI as humane, and this idea of human in the loop. And again, you'll see this in a lot of policies of when it's a risky situation, let's absolutely ensure that the final decision maker is a human and not an AI, not a chatbot, but a face. Sometimes that could be a solution. Sometimes that can be exactly the perverse solution. Sometimes that can be really harmful for what we are trying to achieve. And we should really understand that what we need to see, to study, is really what are our goals, which system is outperforming, and what is really the kind of value. Is it deontological, or is it a result-oriented goal that we're trying to achieve? And we need to have democratic conversations, the right kind of conversations and questions on these issues. So with all of what I said, and I think that some of it is quite controversial, I would say that one thing that is completely lacking in our language, in our debates, is asking about when is the moment that we, as a community, as individuals, as citizens, can demand automation rights. So not only demand at certain moments that we won't have an automated system, that we will have a human in the loop, or not only approving, like an FDA, just saying, OK, this is allowed to be deployed, but when is the moment when we say, you, my fellow driver, have no right anymore to control the wheel because we have a system that is safer. We don't have to agree that this moment is here. That's a factual, empirical question. But when that moment comes, we need to be comfortable to say, we need automation rights. The second kind of implication, and specifically from the privacy fallacy, is that we need rights about data collection and missing information that has really colored so much of our history over time. So in my research, I look at clinical trials that have historically been done on really narrow, very skewed demographics. There's so many missing parts of knowledge that we don't have. Because not everybody has been looked at in the same way. And again, privacy has always been a sword and a shield. Privacy has sometimes been protective of more vulnerable communities, but sometimes it has been used by the powerful to conceal secrets, to conflate privacy with trade secrecy, and to concentrate markets. And what we really want to have is more information and more technological capabilities that are accessible to everybody, and have rights to demand that we are seen, everybody is seen, and that information is feeding into more accurate and more inclusive systems. So I'll end with a call also for considering the fact that we talk so much about how to create trustworthy AI. And I write about trustworthy AI a lot in my research. I care about it. I have helped draft bills that are related to these issues. But what is very important is that we not forget that a huge aspect or a significance lies in the way that humans and machines interact. And we need to think about how we as humans trust AI. So what do I mean by that? I'm a Goldilocks kind of girl. I don't want over-trust, or what we call sometimes in the literature algorithmic admiration, just blindly going after whatever an AI suggests to us. But we also don't want algorithmic aversion. We don't want under-trust, irrational trust, alarmist fear of machines. And again, there's a huge history of this. And one of the things that I have tried to do in the equality machine and my research is to trace the differences in which different communities, different countries around the world, different histories, different religions, and also different generations react differently when they're presented with machines. We need to ask the right questions. We need much more research. It's a nascent field of research, and I invite all of you to think about it in your own work, and we can talk about it, we can collaborate. But there are indications that we relate differently to disembodied algorithms, chatbots, in terms of how much we trust them, how much we will rely on them, versus embodied robots, humanoids. What are the difference between when we're creating a humanoid and a pet robot in terms of how much we will relate well with them and achieve the goals that we're trying to achieve? These are the questions that we need to be asking, and we need to be asking much more of them. And I venture that the nonprofit sector and the governmental sectors, the international community, needs to be in that business. It should not be, I'm smiling because as a behavioral researcher who looks at social psychology and its implications to public policy, I know very well, it's very acute in kind of our field, that this insight that behavioral economics and social psychology and sociology were first studied by the for-profit industry to just kind of think about marketing and how to be more in the business, how to grow the business. And only a few decades later did policymakers recognize how important this field is to help people make good decisions about their own well-being, about their individual and collective goals. And now is the moment to think the same about AI for good. And so I want to thank you and say cheers to AI for good. Thank you.
Hi, Orly. Hi. Welcome. So, congratulations on your book. It's amazing. We had do we have a shot of it? It's called The Equality Machine. That's what this panel is also called. So, I wanted to ask you, what compelled you to write The Equality Machine?
Yeah, I was for a couple of decades now in conversations with both regulators. I am in California and in the United States federal agencies about how can we deploy technology, digital technology in general, and AI in particular, to tackle some of the biggest challenges. So, for example, in my field that I'm most involved in, I look at the employment market, the labor market, and employment relations, discrimination in hiring, in performance evaluation, and pay. And I saw so much potential in what has been developed, but I also saw a lot of resistance and a lot of kind of these buzzwords about how we're automating inequality, how AI is biased. And one of the most important things for me was that we will all have skin in the game. I saw this effect of people who care about ethics and equality and justice and fairness opting out of the technical field and in Silicon Valley, and because we are all the time told that it's doing so much harm, and that creates this vicious cycle where the people that we want to have to hear their voices, we're not really in the game. So the motivation has been to be constructively and cautiously optimistic and bring all of us in kind of a meaningful way into the conversation and the doing.
Right. So, when we talk about equality, a lot of conversations we have are around baked-in bias, like baked-in bias that's actually baked into AI. Do you think that that is overblown? Is that something that is a major concern? And what can be done about bias in AI?
Yeah. So first of all, I think that it is a concern, certainly a concern, and certainly something that we need to be addressing. But I do see how first of all, like I said before, it's not presented in a comparative way. So we have so many human biases. Unfortunately, the history of human existence is one of discrimination, exclusion, inequities. And I'll give you an example from the workplace. It's been so frustrating to see the gender and racial pay gaps stagnating. And if you just did everything that that we are doing today, just continue with the status quo, you see these graphs of how it's it's going to take at least 110 years to maybe just narrow the gap and catch up and close the gap. So we need to do something different. We need, of course, to consider why AI is biased. There are many different reasons, and I think we bundle them, we dump everything into the conversation together. Sometimes it can be because we're not collecting enough data. So that would be the example of facial recognition. We just need fuller and more inclusive data sets. Sometimes it's because it's replicating existing differences and exclusions from our real world. And there, again, we can't expect the technology to correct our own harms. What we need to do is to use the technology to make these exclusions visible, to trace them, to detect them, and to think about new ways to sort. So I think about this, again, a lot in hiring. We used to do this, like the initial reports about hiring algorithms that are a lot of times rehash the same story of like a company trying to tell the algorithm, just hire what we saw as successful employees in the past. And of course that will replicate the kind of dominant population that was hired historically. But now there are huge leaps and advances where you have two algorithms working together on a hiring app, where one is making sorting decisions that do away with the kind of old ways that we thought, you have to go to this college or have to have these credentials, and look at things that are less tied to our demographics. And then a second algorithm that 24/7 audits the equitable distribution of what the algorithm is recommending. So this is the kind of focus that we need to have, not to deny that algorithms can be biased, but to design them better and know that we are already doing that and we have those capabilities.
Right, and we're lucky enough to have you here to kind of explain this to us. And I wanted to ask you, how much do you think a lack of understanding of how AI works actually plays into this narrative of AI, being harmful, the level of risk being super high? Is it about a lack of technological maybe understanding, or things that we don't know? We talk a lot about black boxes.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there are several answers to this. One is, yes, there is a lack of technological knowledge, and I think it's a very, very important role of governments and international organizations to close the digital literacy gap and digital access. So again, I get frustrated that we focus so much on the harms of children being connected, different people being connected, online harms. I worry about those harms. I actually am a consultant on a major public company that looks at content moderation, and I think we should do content moderation better. Yes, these are all things that we should be concerned about, but we should be equally concerned about those who are not connected and who don't have the skills to understand what to look for when they are interacting with AI, with different digital platforms. We need to invest in that because it also it's patterned the way that the skills are distributed. So major investments there. I also think that there is some interest of the developers and owners of certain technologies to aggrandize the technology and focus on this kind of what I call the Terminator fallacy and focus on this unknown future and maybe kind of shift the conversations away from the here and now and how we can be more contextual on what works and how we should all have public options for generative AI, for example. I'm an advocate of having a public option of generative AI and not allowing companies that are creating them based on the history of humanity, of all the knowledge that can be gobbled up by machines and understanding the world. I give the analogy of our genetics, our DNA, where initially some pharma, some biotech were patenting the sequences. For example, the BRCA gene that can detect the propensity for breast cancer. And we had in the United States a Supreme Court decision, and it was initiated by the ACLU, saying that that is based on our information, so it should not be owned and patented and concentrated and controlled by very few. So we need to think about who benefits from alarmists, from distorted conversations.
Right. And in talking about governance, right? Governance to mitigate risks, we talk about AI regulation, and AI is obviously not just one technology. It's a super broad term. Do you think that we can actually put this really complex and diverse set of technologies into such a narrow box, or should we really basically be focusing on use cases and applications?
Yeah, I love that you asked that because I am becoming more and more skeptical about our ability to speak about AI in the abstract. It's not one capability, it's not one technology, and it's certainly not serving one purpose or one context, one policy field. And so when I see these very broad kind of the AI Bill of Rights draft or the AI Act draft, that is so abstract, I worry that we're missing some context, nuance, and democratic conversations about what are our goals. We have these conflicting goals and different moments. Like, are we during a global pandemic, or are we facing a climate threat? Are we talking about health versus are we talking about leisure or financial decisions? They will really require different kinds of support, development, design, deployment, and regulation. So I really call for much more nuance. And I also think that when we do it in kind of that abstract way, there are some ironic results. So for example, when some regulators want us to say that in the highest risk moments, we have a right to a human decision maker as a final decision maker. I laugh because my husband that you saw on the screen, the father of my 3 daughters, when I met him, he was an F-16 pilot. And he now is a behavioral economist, one of my co-authors, and he also flies commercial planes. He has a commercial license. And we think about this one area where automation has been agreed upon all over the world for decades, actually, that in the highest, riskiest moments, we are completely out of the loop as pilots, and if you look at some laws that exist out there, the implications would be that a pilot would say, hi, this is your pilot. We have very risky weather right now, so just so you know, so you'll be informed, passenger, I have no control over the cockpit. That's not the goal that we want to achieve in, this being informed, but we want to achieve safety and we want to achieve it in the, smoothest way. So again, I think it very much depends on the context.
Right. So what do you think that is there something that we should be thinking about right now in terms of AI that we have not dug deep into yet? There's so many conversations about AI right now happening. What have we not touched on, and what are things that maybe policymakers should be thinking about?
Yeah, I think there is a great divide between the technologies around the world that are either embodied or disembodied. We need to really kind of figure out the human-machine interaction. As I mentioned before, there are real differences in how we engage with AI. For example, in schools, I think that social robots are a huge potential. And again, this assumption that using technology that has AI, machine learning in it, that has facial recognition in schools, that collects data, is harmful, and specifically harmful for the more vulnerable children, sometimes it's exactly the wrong way to think about it. Schools have huge disparities in them. So most teachers are under-resourced, schools are understaffed, children don't have the personalized learning that they should have, and that's particularly true in the poorer communities and poor places around the world. So I think that governments should really make a concerted effort to figure out where to deploy the most promising advances first, and how to do it, of course, responsibly, cautiously, but not slowly. If we have something that is life-changing, life-saving, equalizing, knowledge is the great equalizer of our time, then we should really put it to use.
Absolutely. So my final question is, you clearly don't see a dystopian Terminator future for AI. What sort of a future do you see?
Yeah, look, this is up to us. We're facing this seismic moment. We are definitely facing a lot of paradigm shifts in how we work, how we play, how we connect. I worry a lot. I'm a cautious optimistic, but it's because I want to be constructive and not just critical. Here in Switzerland, I'll say, la critique est facile, l'art est difficile. We need, I used the term before, we need skin in the game. We need all of us to build AI for good, and it's up to us. So, if we don't do anything, things can go very wrong, and maybe in the far future, not near future, things can go really, really wrong. But if we are all looking at the potential and the benefits and harnessing the technology for that, and caring about our ongoing democratic commitments to equality, to well-being, to welfare, and being creative about it, not being stuck. So as someone, in California, I'm the director of the Center for Employment and Labor Policy, and I think a lot about the changing social contract that we have as individuals with work. In a lot of places around the world, we have dumped so much of our kind of well-being and social welfare on this one commitment to, or one relationship, full-time employment. That is changing, and I think it's a red herring to try to kind of turn back the wheel and say, let's just fit, the old laws to everybody. We need to think very seriously about, and I can talk about this for a long time, but we'll have to reconnect next year about this and in our ongoing conversations. But we need to think about better taxation. We need to tax, capital as much or more than we tax labor, which is kind of a historical, very tilted way that we've done things, focusing on that labor aspect of taxation. We need to have public options, as I said. And so the future is bright, but we need to be, in it, and we need to shape it.
Great. Your perspectives are so refreshing. I love the positive outlook that you're giving for this, and thank you so much, Orly, for being with us here today.
Thank you, Jennifer, and I know that you do so many important things on safety and using AI and making, again, the world fairer and better and more promising. So thank you.
Thank you.